All right, we are live. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are, Air Force Wingman Outreach. We have a bonus episode today. Normally not on the schedule, but I felt like we needed a little something extra to start off our week on this Monday of a Monday. But let's talk fire dogs, okay? But before we do that, before we get into firefighters and behavioral health, let's talk about Air Force Wingman Outreach at gmail.com. So you can reach out to us. You can email us about any issues that you have and do it anonymously. Air Force Wingman Outreach at gmail.com, which will be at the bottom of the screen once I show it to you. Bang, there you go. Air Force Wingman Outreach at gmail.com. You can also message us, any of the administrators. But without further ado, let's get with I can't talk, y'all. Special guest, okay? Special guest is Jeff Dill. Let me go ahead and bring him on. How you doing, Jeff?
I am doing fabulous. How about yourself?
Hey, I just get tongue tied a little bit. You know what I mean?
So we all do. We all do.
True. But anyway, thank you for coming on and talking to us. And basically, what happened is I saw somebody share a podcast that you did, I believe, with it was National Fire Radio, I believe was the name of it. Mm-hmm. And so, it kind of intrigued me, and I was like, I have never heard of Behavioral Health Alliance, which is basically what you do. Can you explain to the people like what exactly your role is and what you do?
Sure, I appreciate it. I am a retired fire captain in the fire service from the northwest suburbs of Chicago. I had 26 years on the job, and when I was a battalion chief, I went back, got my master's degree, and became a licensed counselor. And then in 2010, I founded Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance, and we could just say FBHA. It's a lot easier to say.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yes, a lot easier to say. And that in 2010, when I founded it, that was the year we started collecting and validating firefighter and EMS suicides across the United States, and just in the fire and EMS. Since then, we have now added dispatchers. And when we say fire, that means volunteer, career, military, as well as wildland. And so we have validated about 1,630 of these tragic events, about a 65% reporting. Where we feel we know we miss out is the military, as well as volunteer fire departments and EMS. So it's a very, very sad situation. We've learned a lot. Unfortunately, we've met a lot of people over the last 10 years. I've traveled over 750,000 miles across the U.S. and Canada. I've spoken at numerous Air Force bases across the U.S. And next week I'll be in the Joint Air Force bases in Charleston, so doing a couple workshops.
Okay, very cool. So I think that's awesome, first of all, and second, I'm glad that it is also a resource that we in the military can use. So when all of this ends, and I'll be sure to put it in the post to this video once this interview is done. If you want to reach out to Jeff or any of his folks, then by all means, please do so. It's a great resource. So can you kind of educate us a little bit, because I asked you in the pre-interview, but I knew behavioral health and mental health were two different things, but I still couldn't put my finger on it. Like, still couldn't understand what it meant. So can you kind of explain to us what the difference is between those two things?
Well, the true, if you want, the true difference is that society looks at the word mental as something scary and let's not address it, where we went with firefighter behavioral health, because I look at it, we want to see what the behaviors are that the person is exhibiting and what are the reasons behind it. Is it the trauma of issues? Is it addictions, relationships, depression? And so we looked at, hey, let's go with behavioral health, because of the behaviors. It softens it a little, and yet people understand what the need is for all the anxiety and stress we go through, the depression, all those behavioral health issues. Okay. So that's why we called it behavioral health.
Okay. But ultimately they're interconnected, right?
Correct.
Got you. So what have you learned in your experience? I mean, you've been at this for a long time. Like, have the more things change, the more things stay the same? Is that kind of what your perspective has been, or
Well, in some aspects, because understand that behavioral health in the fire service military is still really new. And even though the military has been around a little longer than the fire service, we didn't speak about behavioral health in the fire service until we started really talking about it in 2010. And even today, there are pockets across the United States that still don't really accept that there are problems for their people. And it's just, I think it's just the way that some of the officers were born and bred in this belief about behavioral health. And what we teach a lot, we have 7 different workshops. And one of them, we talk about PTSD and suicide awareness, and we talk about in all the workshops cultural brainwashing. And it's not a negative term, but it's more of when we put this uniform on, whether military, fire service, in particular for me, because that's my world, but people expect certain things from us, and that is strength, brave, courageous, self-sacrificing. And when you start doing this, putting that uniform on day in and day out, week after week, month after month, you're expected to act this way. And who expects it? Well, our brothers and sisters we work with, the communities we serve, and the history of the fire service. And yet when you're challenged, both in your personal and professional life, to say, I can handle these things on my own, I don't want to tell anyone that I'm struggling, that might show some weakness.
Right.
It becomes really difficult, and then that's where we see so many people struggle. And we understand addictions is a major role both for military and fire service. And why alcohol? Number one, why not? It's our easiest access. If I'm not sleeping, I'm having issues, maybe relationship issues, stress and anxiety, depression, trauma. Hey, I'll just drive down to the liquor store and pick up a 6-pack, and hey, I didn't sleep so bad. The anxiety wasn't so bad. Now you're on shift for a day or two and you can't touch the stuff, and now you're off for 2 or 3 days. Right. In our world, I'll just go down to the liquor store, and before you know it, you're hooked. And it doesn't make us bad people. It's just that in our world, we've always been told, handle everything on your own. Don't bother anyone else. And so that's why alcohol has been our primary addiction.
Interesting. So, is it the trauma, is it the trauma that, like, I remember asking a firefighter this once, like when we were doing this interview, and just wondering how y'all are able to digest events over and over again. You know what I mean? Like from, the real time versus the EMS versus the post response, all that stuff. Like, have you found that that's been a primary contribution? It almost feels like it gets a numbing feeling after a while. Like you don't feel anything.
And there is an emotional disconnect with that, time and time again, seeing that trauma to where all of a sudden your emotions, and what happens then we take those emotionless expressions and attitudes to our family, and that causes issues within our home lives, and our relationships take a hit. And we talk about what we've really learned is that, yes, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or some people use post-traumatic stress injury, which is a viable, but it's just not in the diagnostic statistics manual that counselors use for diagnosis. So I still use PTSD, and I'm hoping when the new one comes out, they add PTSI. But yes, you see these things, and it leaves a mark on you. But what we found through our data of the 1,630 suicides is that the number one known reason, unknown is number one, but the number one known reason is marital and family relationships, why our brothers and sisters are killing themselves, and then followed by depression, and then diagnosed PTSD. So we need to really look at, is it the aspect of just post-traumatic stress that people are struggling and suffering with, or is it some added issues within their lives, whether their personal or professional life, meaning depression in relationships? Number 4 is physical or mental health issues that they might be having with, and number 5 is addictions. And yes, they can have a combination. They could be legal and financial issues, or a combination. Maybe they went on a bad call, they turn to an addiction, and now it ruins the relationship. So they have 3 or 4 issues going against them. And so it's really tough to decipher, but I believe, unfortunately, that so many people now want to believe that it's easier to stand up and say I deal with PTSD and that's why I'm acting this way,
Right.
instead of saying, well, you know what, I'm really struggling with the relationship. My husband, my wife, my partner wants out of the relationship, and I don't know why.
Right.
And that rejection, it hits us hard, because understand, under the cultural brainwashing, everyone loves us
Mhm.
and the fire service.
Mhm.
And now all of a sudden, my wife wants to leave me, or my husband wants to leave me, and that rejection, it goes deep,
Right.
and it hurts. And so, these are all the things that we see in our data. These are all the things that we address. We have a workshop called Saving Those Who Save Others, the family edition, and it's for spouses and partners to understand how the job affects us, but how it affects them and their children at home, and how to work through these things together as a couple.
Interesting. So also, it kind of made me think of another question. Like you said you had like fire captain, like you were a fire captain for a long
Right.
time. So that's like the top of the food chain, so to speak, right? Like,
No, the chief. Well, it goes chief. Yeah, the fire chief,
okay,
deputy chief, assistant chief, battalion chief. I was a battalion chief for 12 years.
okay,
The only reason I went back to captain was because when they appointed me assistant chief, they put me on days. And
oh,
my wife, due to health issues, and my two daughters had moved to Arizona. We lived in Illinois. I said, why don't you move down to Arizona to be with them?
right,
And so I was starting to travel, and I couldn't do that as much. So after 1 year as assistant chief, I asked to go back to my tested position, which was captain, and that's
okay.
how I finished out my career.
Okay,
So
I got you. I got you. And the reason I asked is because I was trying to get from a perspective of, I guess, a leadership aspect.
yes.
Your brothers and sisters in there with you. How are you? What is that? That feels like more pressure. Because you want them to perform, but are you really intrusive into their lives like that? Like,
Well,
what they're doing.
and it is difficult, because as a licensed counselor and being a battalion chief, when I got that, I'm not counseling any of my people at the station. We've always taught that you don't counsel family, you don't counsel friends.
Right.
But I would be there to listen, and I would be there to find counselors for them, and refer to others, and that's important. But understanding that leadership role, it is difficult, because as you move up the ladder in the leadership role, some of the membership connection you start losing.
Mhm.
Just as a small example, like I said, I've done thousands of workshops across the U.S. and Canada, and so many times I heard, Jeff, great workshop, I just wish our chief officers would attend.
Mhm.
And so what message does that send to those members of that department if the fire chief and the chief officers don't attend about behavioral health and suicide within that organization? And so all those struggles as a chief officer, you have to really get down and get back to the basics of understanding what your members might be going through. And there have been times I've had chiefs call me on the phone saying, Jeff, I'm en route to a firefighter at our apartment who just took his life. What am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? And I tell him, said, Chief, you have to speak from your heart, and you tell him, hey, this one hurts. This one hurts me, and we're going to work together on this issue of bonding and things. And so, yeah, chief officers, they need it just as much, and their stress and anxiety is different from going on calls. And so in our data, it shows no discrimination. It doesn't matter if you're a fire, EMS, military, wildland, EMS, paramedic, dispatcher. It doesn't care if you're career volunteer, city, suburban, rural, military, male, female, ages, ranks. There's no discrimination. So it applies to everyone in the first responder world.
True. And you said you just expanded it to EMS or first responders?
Dispatchers,
Dispatchers?
yeah, communication specialists. So
Okay.
we have validated 4 of those losses, and I have another one to validate still for 2021.
Okay. So, in the purview for FBHA is firefighters, EMS, dispatchers, and first responders.
Just those 3.
Just
Yeah,
those
just
three?
those 3.
Okay.
Yeah,
Forgive me,
we
I don't know the lingo much.
Yeah, no, that's we don't do police. I've spoken in front of 500 LA police officers years ago, and they say, "Oh, yeah, great workshop," but why do we have a firefighter speaking in our and I knew right then and there,
It's
I
like
better not cross
something
my
with the
culture.
fire. It was
Yeah.
the firefighters. I got you. I got
Yeah, and maybe they just didn't like my opening joke of sorry that you couldn't pass the fire department job
you.
applications.
Ooh,
No,
sorry. Goodness. We look well, you know what? It's all good,
yeah,
but
I mean, yeah, exactly. We worked with Cook County Sheriff up in our area, and I mean they were fabulous. They'd come into the station and watch the games on Sunday during their break time and things. I mean, we worked we had to work really well. And then Inverness, where our station, one of our stations, they had a police department that started, and just about 2 years into it, we responded to a call where one of the police officers was having a heart attack on a call, and we lost that police officer, and the bonding that we shared was very deep, very sorrowful for both of us,
sure.
police and fire. So
Understood. There are definitely moments in time where this
absolutely
connect you, especially in y'all line of work.
right.
So for the military aspect, like, are we, do we have access to the same workshops and different things? Like,
Absolutely. I've been to Eielson in January, and if you
ooh,
haven't been to Fairbanks in January, it's pretty cold.
yes,
So,
it is negative temperatures from what
yeah,
I hear. Um,
but just beautiful. So I've been, like I said, 6 or 7. Um, Next week, I'm going down to the Joint Air Force bases, and they're gaining a couple workshops. I've been to the Pentagon and spoken to brigadier generals who have, wanted to know what our workshops are all about, and what makes us different than any other organization in the United States. And there are now hundreds and hundreds of fire and EMS organizations on behavioral health, mental health, whatever it is. And what makes us different than anyone else is not only the tracking and validating of the data, because our data, if you Google it, I've been on. I've been on the Dr. Drew show. We've had CBS Nightly News across the nation cover us, just numerous media outlets. But what makes us different is that 90% of all our workshops come from our brothers and sisters. And so we take, if we're going to a military installation, we were just at Luke Air Force a couple of weeks ago, I will make sure that I add the specifics of, what is just a little different about being a military firefighter and those issues that they deal with. And it comes from our brothers and sisters. So that, like I said, that's what makes us different. It's not Jeff Dill saying, hey, I looked this up on the internet. This comes from talking to thousands and thousands of fire and EMS and plus family members. We hold an annual weekend retreat for family survivors. We just finished it last week. We were in Orlando. It was our 7th year in a row. We hold it the 3rd week of May, and it's just one of the most powerful weekends you can just ever imagine. People opening up their hearts about their losses of their loved ones. We're basically all families now, and they come from all over the United States, and they are some of the most courageous, loving people you can ever imagine.
That's awesome. So, when you do these workshops, do you ultimately go back and like have this follow up thing, like seeing how things are going, that sort of thing? Like how does an organization necessarily measure the effectiveness of what it is that you guys provide?
Yeah, whoever the contact person is that calls us,
Yeah.
they will typically call us, within a week or two, and we stay in contact and say, hey, how's it going? What attributions have you seen, based on the workshops? And what we've seen is more increase of a buy-in, saying, man, we didn't realize this was the issue, or so we also consult with fire departments, including some of the military, on how to create behavioral health programs.
Okay.
And a behavioral health program to us is not just having an employee assistance program and a peer support or a CISM team. For us, it's 12 different points, everything from training in the academies all the way to retirement.
Okay.
We started noticing in our data that we're losing a lot of retirees. And so out of the 292 that we have validated, and it's difficult to get retirees because they move and people lose connection with them. But out of the 292, 37 of them took their lives in the first week of retirement.
Wow.
And so we interviewed 127 recent retirees, and we found top three issues that we address in our workshops, and that's loss of identity, loss of belonging, and lack of purpose. So these are, like I said, these are the things that we learn from the data and talking to people. And I'm very direct.
No, no.
A couple of our themes are be direct, challenge with compassion. If you hear something that doesn't sound right, or learn to listen up when someone says something to you, because they see us a lot better than we will ever see ourselves. I've been married 41 years come November. My wife knows me inside and out. When she knows something's, she'll say it. And I'm thinking, hey, I'm all right. So learn how to listen. But one of the biggest things that we teach is called doing an internal size up. And, size up for us in the fire service is, real easy. Yeah, we pull up, it's a 2-story residential. We got heavy smoke, coming from sector A. We'll be pulling a hose line going interior. That's a size up. We're seeing what the situation is. People are coming in. Now you have to do an internal size up. And what that means to us is that we have to ask ourselves on a daily basis, why am I acting this way? Why am I feeling this way? And that's important, to understand our emotions and to talk about it, and to hear other people, what they see in us. Because if we can stop and understand these emotions before they get to a point where what we call cognitive disconnect. And what cognitive disconnect is that we base decisions on the emotions we're going through at that moment. So if it's anger, if it's depression, PTSD, guilt, jealousy, whatever those emotions are, if we can find within ourselves to do that internal size up before it gets to that, because let's take anger as an example. Out of the 1,630 suicides that we have validated, 63 have been murder-suicide, where our brothers or sisters killed their loved ones and then themselves. And, and I've seen these cases. I've talked and validated. They get into such an angry mode that their thought process is, well, why can't you treat me like John Q. Public treats me? And their loved ones don't put them on that pedestal. And so that anger just overrides their thought process of what is right and what is wrong. And the same thing, like I said, for depression and jealousy or guilt. And we know that in the military and the fire service, divorce rates are high. They're absolutely high. And like I said, that guilt that maybe I cheated on my spouse or partner, or maybe my spouse or partner is, and you get that rejection. And rejection is difficult because everyone loves us as firefighters. Everyone loves us as military. And now my loved one, my closest partner, is rejecting me. And those are deep scarring issues. And that's why we see that as the number one known reason for our brothers and sisters killing themselves.
You get that hero type of aspect. That
right.
Of that uniform gives you some sort of validation. And then, once you get that uniform off, then, your loved ones see you for who you are, but you're still kind of emotionally wearing that.
And exactly. And people have to understand, it's just a piece of clothing. We're human beings, and we have emotions, we have issues, and that it's okay to ask for help. And I get 7 to 10 calls a week from our brothers and sisters across, and there many have been military as well. And so on our webpage, we have, I was asked last year by the National Volunteer Fire Council to put together a list of counselors that work with first responders and military. And so I've personally spoken to about 350 counselors across the U.S. And that resource list is on our webpage at ffbha.org under tabs. If you go under the tab resource tab, and you'll see it. You can download it, and you can call these counselors. So it's or you can call me, and I can try to help you find counselors in your area. Telehealth has been a major benefit. About the only one I've seen out of COVID. It's opened up telehealth so that someone in Albany, New York, could talk to a counselor in Rochester, New York. And so, and why not Rochester? That's where I was born and raised there. So it's a
All
good,
right now,
good area.
shout out to Rochester.
Yep, yep. Shout out to my mom and dad and my sisters out in Rochester.
Right on, right on. Yeah, but I put the link to the organization or to the website on the screen, and then of course I'll put it in the post when it comes in there. But you said that you have a list of therapists that can connect to.
Right. Under the resource tab,
Okay.
you'll see directory, National Directory of Counselors,
Okay.
and they can click on that, look in their state, and call those people. They've been vetted by me. So,
Oh, that's super cool.
and plus they've gone through workshop trainings as well.
Okay. Okay. So they have a lot of the similar experience that you have.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, there's a workshop we created called A Firefighter's Life, and it's, like I said, training counselors and chaplains about the things that we've learned.
So what is your organization hoping to see like in the future? You know, as far as for the way the job or the way the career, I want to say career field, that's so military, but the job description, the job for like firefighters, like what are you envisioning as like the ideal situation, or at least the hope moving into the future?
I would say two things. First one is that we see more organizations like FBHA work together, and we don't see that right now. Like I said, back in 2010, you could have gone on Facebook. You wouldn't have found any organizations like you do now, that work for fire and EMS and help them. That's why we called it an alliance. I thought, well, we could all work together. Well, I was seriously wrong on that. So I'd like to see more organizations, because if I'm a chief, say either military, fire, EMS, if I'm a chief and I Google, I would like training on behavioral health, the list is long, and it's incredible.
Right.
And so I would like to see more of a collaborative effort in the training aspect for the first responders.
Right.
And the second one is I would like to see every program, every department. Now, you might not get all 12 points, but I'd like to see every military, and I've passed on our information to the Air Force.
Sure.
On how to create a behavioral health program, because, like I said, it encompasses training the academies, addressing the family issues, creating guidelines and policies on behavioral health, and working with chaplains. Chaplains are a major influence in people's lives. Training counselors, outside resources, not just within the military or the fire service, outside resources. And then, like I said, working with peer support teams, CISM teams, training them to be available. And then retirement, being, hey, you know what, you're about a year and a half out. What do you plan on doing with your life? Let's help you set some goals so that it's a smooth transition from the military, fire service into retirement, because we want you to have a great career, but we want you to have a better life afterwards. So I that's one of my goals, is to make sure every organization has a behavioral health program. And that's what I'll be instituting in Las Vegas when I start July 1st.
Okay. So I mean, but all of that is attainable. And
Absolutely it is.
And I think that we went from zero information to a plethora of information at our fingertips, right? And so now we just need to filter through whatever specific to our situation. So in this case, we have your organization, which has the military experience already, to communicate with our fire dogs and the other ones applicable. And then just having the communication and the workshops and the support needed for anybody that's going through that situation. From my understanding, obviously, unfortunately, once a brother or sister takes their life, ultimately their spouses are connected with your organization for forever.
Yeah, it's the same. They all say it. It's not an organization they want to join, but they're glad it's here. And we have templates of guidelines and policies, how to build your peer support teams,
Mm,
how to select those members, chaplain policies.
mm,
We hand that out for free. So
mm.
if anyone wants any of those templates, all they have to do is email me, and
Okay.
I'll send them the 12 points on how to create, what are those 12 points on creating a behavioral health program.
Mhm.
So, it does me no good to have all that information just kind of hoard it within
Yeah,
myself. We're trying to make a difference.
absolutely.
I'm trying to make a difference so that when I see the big guy upstairs, that they're going to say, "Well, Jeff, you did a lot of nasty stuff in your youth, but you made up a little for it in your
Sure,
elderly."
sure. They say, come on through. Come on
Right?
through. You're clear.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't do well in warm weather.
Sure, sure. Hey, listen, it's already hot in Texas now, so
There you go. And
I
moving to Vegas is no bargain either.
Woo,
So
yeah, you going to the dry spot, and
right,
hopefully AC is working. Um,
absolutely.
but
So
so do you have any advice? Like, I mean, from a perspective, and it can, any advice. I mean, you say don't be afraid to ask for help, but I definitely know that there's some folks out there. We have 39,000, about 600 members in our group. And
right.
so, I'm trying to kind of encourage that if we can. But what is your advice on that?
Well, a couple things. One is, I, I always had, as a counselor that I worked with first responders, I would have them journal a little. And the journal kind of opens up their eyes. And I don't mean the kind little diary that my sister had back in the 70s with a little flower on it and a little lock.
Oh,
I'm just talking about, at the end of the night, write down some of the emotions you went through, some of the things that, your behaviors because of those emotions. How are your reactions? How were your reactions from your loved ones, your families, that watched you do that? And because when we talk to each other, when people talk to each other, we can kind of BS them into believing what we want them. We're very good as first responders in that world. But when you sit down at the end of the night and write from your heart, you're not going to BS your heart, and you're not going to BS those emotions. And so it gives you a better understanding of the things that you might be struggling with without you even realizing. So by writing that down, and the other thing that we highly recommend that's been working really well is doing that internal size up with your support, your loved one, a family member. Just sit down at the end of the night and say, these are the things when I look at myself, I struggle with anger today, or I was really quiet, and for reasons because something triggered in my mind about a child drowning, and talk to your loved one and have them share their, whatever their emotions were during that day, and it builds that ability to talk to each other about emotions, and that's been difficult for fire and EMS, and especially in the fire service where it's a male dominant career. And so, but what we see is some of the females unfortunately fall prey to cultural brainwashing as well, and
trying
they
to fit in, I imagine.
yeah, they're trying to fit in, and that brings to the one point is that when we look at the data in society, the number one method for males to take in their lives is firearms, and the number one method for females is overdose. Yet when we look at our data, the number one method for males is firearms, and the number one method for females is firearms. And is it because, yes, they've been on those calls and they see it's 99.999% effective, or is it because they fall prey to that cultural brainwashing of how they're supposed to act in a male dominant career, that not only do they work that way, but they die that way? And so that's, we look at this data and it's overwhelming what we see in it. And I can't say for sure this is the reason,
Sure.
but that data allows me to make that statement and ask that question so people will think about it. And when you start thinking about things, you start doing that internal size up, and that's what that is. So we recommend just journal at the end of the night. What emotions, I struggled with sleep last night because of anxiety. And then, counseling. I'm a firm believer in counseling. And counseling doesn't mean you have to go to a professional either. It means I could go to my chaplain, I can go to a peer support team. As long as you talk, do not bury what burdened you. Everyone knows the word resiliency, and many people are training on resiliency. But for us at FBHA, resiliency starts by talking and not burying those things, and talk to people. And it really does alleviate a lot of that issues that you're struggling with. Just talk to someone, talk to your support. I've had firefighters call me in tears, and I'll say, well, what's your support system at home? Well, in these cases, I have a wife. Well, talk to your wife about it. Have you talked to your wife about it? Oh, no, I can't do that. I can't let her know I'm struggling and I'm weak. And it's like, wow, this is your support system, the person who loves you the most. And yet they're still afraid to open up. So these are the things we're seeing, and we're also seeing them work. And so that's those are two of the things I recommend.
No, greatly appreciated. And on that note, I want to thank you, Jeff, for being on with us.
I appreciate
I
it.
appreciate the advice. And so we got the website on the bottom of the screen. I also provide it in the post. If you have any questions for Jeff, by all means, I will provide the contact information so you can reach out to him. But in the meantime, great advice. Start that journal. I journal.
Good,
So,
excellent.
I journal. So it's definitely something that is about an emotional release and more to yourself. And when you go back and read it, you tend to think, okay, you know what? I had a bad day that day, but maybe the next day I had a good day, or next
Right,
week I had a good week. It's all about progression and documentation.
right.
So, and also to our membership, Air Force Wingman Outreach at gmail.com. Please reach out to us if you need. We are here for you. And this will be on YouTube once I upload it. So, with that being said, have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. It was an honor.